Hello, sisters. So I'm going to start playing Contrapoints video, and I'll have to do it in parts because his video is almost an hour long. And I love this little warning at the beginning of his video. He's now accusing himself of transphobia because he's actually going to go look at Blanchard's theory. So I found that to be kind of funny. He's calling himself a transphobe. So let's begin. Oh, and I suppose the funny thing here is he's having Bailey's. I guess this is supposed to be a quip on Michael Bailey. And he's drinking Bailey's, and now he's going to sing to himself in the mirror. And this is all supposed to be autogynephilic. This is what basically this is a little bit of rage, narcissistic rage. One wonders why he has to put so much of this in the video, why he just can't sit there and talk about autogynephilia. He's got to do this whole theatrical thing. I mean, it's just, you know, this is what makes the video so long and tedious.
In 1989, a sex researcher named Ray Blanchard published a controversial, provocative, politically incorrect theory claiming that trans women are not, as custom has it, essentially female souls accidentally born into male bodies.
This is the feminine essence theory that's been completely and totally debunked. The feminine essence theory basically is the idea that these men are born with a female soul. Which, yeah, I mean, it's just hilarious and stupid on its face. And what Blanchard did is he basically said, yeah, there's no feminine essence bullshit going on here. It's basically men who have this fetish. There's two types. Men who have this fetish for femininity and try to become the female that they love, which involves an erotic target location error, which they start loving themselves as the woman that they've created in their mind. That's autogynephilia. And then the other type is your standard homosexual, transsexual who is solely attracted sexually to males. Whereas autogynephilia, the men who are autogynephilic can be sometimes bisexual, but mostly they are heterosexual men who want to be with women.
Instead, he claimed, they are men of two types, gay men who love straight men and straight men who love themselves. For the latter condition, Blanchard coined the term autogynephilia, New Greek for love of oneself as a woman. It's a theory that contradicts what almost all trans women say and believe about themselves.
No, it doesn't, actually. There are many men who I can think of Anne Lawrence right off the top. There are men that have just come straight out and said, you know what, Blanchard was right. So this is not an argument, per se, saying that, oh, these men don't agree with it, and I know them. Yeah, that's what they experience, what these researchers have experienced, particularly Bailey, but Blanchard as well, is the rage of men, autogynephiles, because, yeah, he figured it all out. Because he figured out that it's a fetish, that it's a sexualized fetish, that these autogynephiles have created this persona, this womanhood persona in their brains, and they're attracted to it. That's why when we talk about one of the primary features of autogynephilia, which is the erotic target error location, this is crucial in understanding autogynephilia because the man who is an autogynephile is attracted to the idea of himself as a woman. his attraction is not to anybody outside of him, but the attraction is to the thing that he's the female that he's created in his mind that he then tries to become. Yeah. So saying that, oh, there's men who it contradicts what every man in a dress says about themselves. That's not an argument, Nick, because that's actually not true.
And affirms the common prejudice that trans people are really just sex perverts, which...
Well, that's kind of reducing it. That's reducing it into making it sound sinister. It's not sinister. It's just a fact, okay? That there are men like you, Nick, who later in the video, you will admit that you're a behavioral autogynephile. But saying, yeah, we're just all sex perverts, yeah, that's stupid, and that's not how Blanchard or Bailey characterized any of you dudes. So yeah, fail.
Okay, some of us are, but not for the reasons Blanchard said.
Okay, so see, this video is full of one side of Nick's mouth says, oh, Blanchard is totally wrong, and the other side of Nick's mouth says, but I am a behavioral autogynephile. This is the entire video summed up. I'm sorry, but I mean, I've only been on here for almost 7 minutes, but that is the video summed up.
Just what the hell do I think I'm doing? Rest assured, in this video I am going to argue that Blanchard's theory is false, but a lot of trans women are probably nervously wondering why I'm using my platform to potentially increase awareness of a sinister fringe theory that...
Yeah, it's not a sinister fringe theory. The theory's been around for decades, and it's been mulled over and talked about, and yeah, it turns out the theory is correct. I know that he's going to bring up one scientist in particular, Moser, who I will dissect. Trust me, I will. Moser, who kind of wandered into sexology and decided that, yeah, no such thing as autogynephilia, but actually Moser is a hack, and I will obviously expose that later in the video.
Only adds to the stigma we all already have.
So here we go. I've heard this. Okay, this is not the first time that I have delved into an argument where the other side basically said, oh, it's stigmatizing. Well, yeah, you're characterizing it as a stigma, but we're not making a value judgment here, okay? Blanchard is not making a value judgment. He basically researched this for years and came up with his typology, and so far, it's correct. Nobody has shot down Blanchard's typology. Nobody has. And so this whole, oh, but you're stigmatizing me, I'm a sex pervert. No, that's you doing that to yourself, okay? Like I said, Blanchard never made a value judgment. He just reported what he saw.
After all, autogynephilia gives scientific legitimacy to our culture's most twisted misrepresentations of trans women.
No, it actually doesn't, okay? It actually doesn't. That's you. See, Nick is imposing a value judgment on Blanchard's typology. Instead of just explaining Blanchard's theory in basic terms, he is the one, Nick is the one saying, oh, yeah, he's calling me a sex pervert, which, of course, Blanchard never did. And, of course, yeah, we're going to play Silence of the Lambs with the crazy fucking autogynephile here. But you know what, Nick? There are a lot of dudes, autogynephiles, who are just like this guy. So, yeah, saying that it's not true, it's not true, it's not true, I'm a sex pervert. Yeah, sorry. But there are plenty of men who do exactly what this guy's done. And, of course, they have killed women. They have beat women. They have hurt women. So, yeah, because of the response, the rage response. So, yeah, part of autogynephilia, this whole creation that these men make in their minds of this female that they've created, if anybody challenges that, they go into fits of rage, narcissistic rage. And it is a fact that the research has shown, and I will link the study in the low bar, that over 80% of these dudes have some significant personality disorder, namely narcissistic personality disorder. And that accounts for why, when Blanchard came out with this theory and when Bailey wrote his book, they were attacked viciously by autogynephiles because the response was narcissistic rage. So, yeah, I don't even understand why Nick is basically trying to play on people's emotions instead of making a valid argument.
So it's understandable that to a lot of trans women, the prospect of this concept gaining cultural traction is pretty terrifying.
Well, it doesn't have to be terrifying. You're making it terrified. You're making a value judgment here.
However, I respond that, as one of YouTube's leading B-list transsexuals, I've had several conversations with academics and journalists where it becomes clear that they believe in Blanchard's theory.
Yes, they do. And guess who knows the science? They do, because they've been doing it for decades. Not some dude on the internet who's in a rage right now because, oh my God, sexologists who've been doing this for decades have figured it out. I mean, please.
Even if the cowards won't admit it to my face. So
I'll admit it to your face. You're an autogynephile. I knew that from the moment I saw you do this whole I'm a woman now. Okay? You did it later in your life. And, I've watched your videos when you were Nick. I've seen the evolution. And you are an autogynephile, Nick. Just face reality.
So, as I see it, the damage is already done. What's needed now is an accessible, convincing refutation of the theory.
And you know what? So many of these autogynephilic men have tried to refute the theory. And Bailey even offered, of all the autogynephiles that Bailey studied, he offered one in particular to refute Blanchard's theory in his book. And of course, this dude couldn't do it. You can't do it.
I hope this video will accomplish 3 things. 1, persuasively argue that the wrong theory is wrong.
Well, yeah, see, again, the wrong theory is wrong. I mean, this is not an argument.
2, account for how a wrong theory became so influential.
It became influential because they studied it for decades and figured out that it's true. So, yeah.
And 3, move beyond some of the platitudes about trans people and open up a deeper discussion about what it really means to be transgender. Socrates, you know the drill. 2. Blanchard's Typology. The mainstream scientific view, endorsed by the World Professional Association for Transgender Health, the DSM-5, and most
political organizations that were made much after Blanchard's Typology. What you have to understand, folks, about transgenderism today is it's much different because it's become politicized. Back when Blanchard was doing all of his research and meeting all of these men, we didn't have all these organizations that injected their politics and their trans activism into the picture. This is why I always say in my videos, I trust more the research that was done in the 70s than I do in the research that's done in the last 5 to 10 years or so, because it's been politicized.
Practicing clinicians is that the primary reason trans people transition is to alleviate gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is a state of social, emotional, anatomical, sexual, spiritual, and sartorial angst relating to one's assigned birth sex.
You're not assigned a sex. You are a sex. I don't know how many times I have to keep saying that. The doctor does not wait for the baby to pop out of the womb and go, I wonder what we're going to assign this infant today. No. Sex is not assigned. You are a sex.
Which is mostly relieved by socially and medically transitioning to the gender.
It's not mostly relieved. That's another research in the low bar. The link will be in the low bar. It's not relieved. Okay, this is why the suicide rate after surgical intervention is still so high. Link in the low bar.
Of one's psychological identity. This is what motivates
psychological identity. This is all psychological, folks, okay? None of this is rooted in biology. It's all psychological delusion.
me to transition, and I endorse the mainstream scientific view.
The mainstream scientific view, which is what? What is the mainstream scientific view? What is the politicized mainstream scientific view that has successfully opposed Blanchard?
However,
oh, he's not going to mention it because there is none. All there is a bunch of political trans activist organizations yelling and screaming that Blanchard and Bailey are wrong. That's really what it amounts to. And again, the video that I did yesterday, Alice Dreger monitored and closely researched what these autogynephiles did to Bailey after he published his book. They went after his children. The narcissistic rage response in these men after Bailey's book was published was unbelievable. And I really, truly, it is a very long essay because she accounts, she goes step by step by step how these autogynephiles attacked Bailey. And you must read it. That link, of course, will be in the description box.
Sex researcher Blanchard has a different theory. According to Blanchard, trans women are driven to transition primarily by sexual motivations.
Yes, fetishistic, sexually erotic motivations. It's called erotic motivation.
He didn't really bother to think about trans men or non-binary.
Well, you know why he didn't think about that? Because those are invented categories that you activists have made up, okay? The reason why Blanchard, it's almost like saying, I am a researcher and I study men who think they're women. And then Nick goes, but why didn't you study women who think they're men? It's a non-argument, okay? Blanchard studied, he was a sexologist. He studied the population that he wanted to study. He doesn't have to study women who have this delusion. No, he studied men. And the reason he studied men was because these men came to him wanting to have surgical intervention. And so this is why he had so much contact with these men. So asking a researcher why he doesn't research X as opposed to Y is a stupid fucking argument. It's not even an argument. Another thing is that back in the day, before transgenderism became so politicized, we knew that there were more men who had this psychological impairment than women. And that is actually because transgenderism has become so political and such a fad. Now we see more women presenting at gender clinics than we would expect. So, yeah, not an argument, Nick.
People, so you all are excused. You can just grab a beer and laugh it up. Blanchard claims that trans women can be divided into two types of men. And yeah, I know, just hold your objections for the end. The first type are the
What would be an objection to that? You are men.
Homosexual transsexuals.
Okay, so hold on. The first type is homosexual transsexuals.
Sexual motivations. He didn't really bother to think about trans men or non-binary people, so you all are excused.
Please.
You can just grab a beer and laugh it up. Blanchard claims that trans women can be divided into two types of men. And yeah, I know, just hold your objections for the end. The first type are the homosexual transsexuals. These gay boys cannot get enough dick, and who can blame them? Essentially, the homosexual transsexuals are naturally effeminate gay men who transition because 1, society is more accepting of them as women than as very effeminate men, and 2, becoming women is a good sexual strategy for them since they do better as women in the heterosexual dating market than as male femmes in the mask-for-mask dominated gay scene. The second type of trans women are the autogynephilic transsexuals. These inscrutable perverts can apparently get off just by looking in the mirror.
Yeah, there you go. There's another mischaracterization.
Blanchard describes autogynephiles as straight, bi, or self-avowed asexual men. It doesn't really matter because their primary sexual orientation is misdirected inward, leading to paraphilic sexual arousal at the thought of being or becoming women.
That's called the erotic target location error. It's directed inward and not outward, yes.
Which is their true motivation to transition. Now, I'm going to argue that this theory is wrong, but first I want to acknowledge that there does seem to be some observational validity to
See what I mean? One side of Nick's mouth says it's wrong, wrong, wrong. The other side says, yeah, it's sort of true.
the claim that trans women tend to fall into one of two clusters of correlated traits. I'll replace the stigmatizing terms homosexual.
So what Nick is going to do here, because he can't handle the terms, he's raging out, he's going to make up his own typology, A and B, instead of sticking with Blanchard's theory. So he's not arguing against Blanchard's theory now. He's arguing against the theory that he's going to make up for himself.
Sexual, transsexual, and autogynephile with more neutral language. Let's say cluster A and cluster B. Cluster A.
Oh, wow. Now, let me ask everybody a question. Does Nick making up more new terms add to this? No, it actually makes it a little bit more confusing because now you're not really arguing against Blanchard's typology. You're making up your own words now because you're just confusing people. There is homosexual transsexuals on this side and autogynephilic transsexuals on this side. Why you have to make up new words? Well, of course, Blanchard has a theory about that. Is because you cannot accept it. You are upset because Blanchard used words you don't like. Oh, poor you.
Trans women are mostly androphilic, that is, attracted to men. They transition relatively early in life and are very effeminate as children. Cluster B trans women are mostly gynephilic, attracted to women, transition relatively later in life, and have outwardly boyish childhoods.
Just like you. You're an autogynephile, Nick.
When I first thought about this typology, it initially seemed pretty valid. I went through the mental list of trans women I know and found I could pretty easily sort them. Cluster A, cluster A, cluster B, cluster B. But as I've thought about it more, it's partially unraveled. Without even leaving my circle of acquaintances, I can think of a trans woman who followed all the cluster A patterns but now dates women, and a trans woman who followed all the cluster B patterns but now exclusively dates men.
Wow. That's not even an argument. You know two people that you think don't fit the typology. Ooh, scary.
So while I think there may really be two genuine trends here, I interpret them merely as correlation clusters that get fuzzy around the edges. Blanchard, however, takes homosexual, transsexuals, and autogynephiles to be two sharply distinct types.
They are. They are sharply distinct. Just because you know two people who you don't think fit into the type or have changed their orientation doesn't mean Blanchard was wrong.
With two completely different psychosexual motivations to transition. And this is what I strongly disagree with. The notion that male homosexual strategy or autogynephilic lust are the primary motivations to transition.
You see, back in the day, when Blanchard was recommending these men for SRS, we didn't have all of these trans activist organizations. Okay, there were some, but not many, as we have today. So, yeah, that kind of accounts for what Nick is saying right now.
And I have a lot of backup here, since trans women almost universally reject this characterization of their...
Yeah, the reason why they reject the characterization is because, like you, they make up a value judgment and call themselves perverts when Blanchard did nothing of the sort. You reject it because part of the problem with autogynephilic dudes like yourself is that you have other comorbid psychological issues. And because this persona can never be questioned, because you go into attacking the scientists who have studied this, it's all part of showing that this is what you are. For example, all the autogynephiles who attacked Bailey and went after his kids, yeah, That's part of being an autogynephile, because you don't like to be questioned. When people know that you're a man and you get called a man, you don't like it, and it sends you into anger. And this was all predicted by the theory. So yeah, I mean, you're following a similar pattern that other autogynephilic males have done.
Experience. Now you'd think that'd be a major problem for the theory, but fortunately, Blanchard has an airtight response to that, namely that trans women who disagree with him are fucking liars.
No, that's not what it, no. Blanchard's typology, okay, autogynephilia involves certain psychological characteristics. And one of them is the fact, and I will put the research in the description, that most of these men have a personality disorder. Over 80% of them have a comorbid personality disorder. More than likely, it's narcissistic personality disorder. So whenever they are questioned, or whenever someone comes up with the revealing aspect, their eroticism behind what they're doing, they react narcissistically. So yeah, it's not, you're characterizing Blanchard's research in your own way and reacting to the thing that you just created.
I mean, that's really the scientific ideal, isn't it? A theory that can't be falsified.
It can be falsified. You just can't do it this way. You would have to, like a sexologist like Blanchard and Bailey, you'd have to become a sexologist and you'd have to study this stuff like they've done, not be some dude on the internet who's fucking angry that somebody has figured out that you're a man, you're an autogynephilic man. I mean, come on.
It's perfect. 3.
Now he's going to attack Bailey.
Man who would be queen. Blanchard's theory likely would have been glanced at by a handful of sexologists before fading into the endless sea of forgotten academic publications.
Oh, again, now Nick thinks Blanchard's theory would have just gone away if Michael Bailey hadn't written a book. I mean, this is all Nick's projection.
Had it not been given a major publicity boost by J. Michael Bailey, a Northwestern psychology professor who endorsed Blanchard's theory in a 2003
He's obviously, Nick's not talking about all the other researchers who support Blanchard's typology, which he mentioned at the beginning of the video, that most people, most of these scientists, agree with Blanchard. Duh!
Top science book titled The Man Who Would Be Queen. Great cover, Bailey. Very controversial.
Yes, and you know what? He mentions the cover of Bailey's book. Now, there's an interesting story behind the cover of Bailey's book. The reason why Bailey chose the cover that he did, and the cover is a hairy-legged low shot of a man wearing size 13 pumps. And the reason he chose that was because he was rejecting the feminine essence theory that so many of you dudes like to put forward as your so-called rebuttal to Blanchard's typology. And yes, guess what? When the book came out and all the autogynephiles saw the cover, they reacted. They literally tried to ruin Michael Bailey as a scientist. Like I said, the link to that story will be in the description box. And it's a long story, but it's worth a read, because the way that these autogynephiles attacked a scientist, it was unrelenting.
Very provocative, very politically incorrect. I have been triggered. Well done. Now, Bailey, I read your book, which, considering how much I enjoy your cream, was just amazingly bad. The Man Who Would Be Queen is a frightening book for trans women because it's a...
Why is it so frightening? Why? I mean, do you realize that Bailey worked with these men to write this book? You understand that he's a scientist, right? And you also understand that the book wasn't meant to be a research publication because he is a peer-reviewed researcher. This is where Nick characterizes Bailey's book as something other than what it's not. So he's arguing against a straw man that he's creating.
acutely transphobic, but also kind
Oh, Bailey's book is it's transphobic. Ooh. Yeah, you're not really arguing against his book. His book was not meant to be a peer-reviewed article. Okay? He is a scientist. He is a peer-reviewed researcher. You are just sitting there saying, oh, but his book wasn't peer-reviewed and I'm going to argue against it like that. Well, guess what? Many autogynephiles like yourself did much worse to Bailey. They tried to fucking ruin him as a scientist because they didn't like his book. They reacted with narcissistic rage.
vivid and well written, and it introduced a wide audience to Blanchard's typology. The first two parts of the book describe homosexual transsexuals, including Bailey's and his male research assistant's observations that they're super fuckable and natural-born sex workers.
I start upstairs to get the panoramic view.
Okay, so there's Peter Coffin reading a description that Bailey got from working with these autogynephilic men and homosexual transsexuals. These are stories that they gave him. I mean, you know, so yeah, what Nick is trying to do is he's trying to make Bailey out to be some quack when he really is a research scientist who just simply wrote a popularized version of all the men in dresses that he studied.
I see Kim for the first time on the stairs dancing, posing. She is spectacular, exotic. I find out later that she is from Belize. And sexy. Her body is incredibly
This is not an argument.
curvaceous, which is a clue that it may not be natural. And I notice a very subtle and not unattractive angularity of the face, which is also not clearly diagnostic on this tall siren. It is difficult to avoid viewing Kim from two perspectives, as a researcher, but also as a single heterosexual man.
Wow, Bailey, great science writing.
Yeah, see? That's what I said he would do. Nick is basically making a straw man. Bailey did not intend this book to be a fucking peer-reviewed paper. He's got plenty of those. Fuck sakes, Nick.
When he's done drooling all over the homosexual transsexuals, Bailey moves on to the autogynephilic transsexuals, focusing almost entirely on a single case study of a trans woman he calls Cher, whose backstory is a stomach-churning nightmare of autoerotic mania and transvestic masturbation.
Do you know that Bailey's experience with these transsexuals is decades long, right? You do understand that, Nick. They're not just a couple of friends that you have. He's a researcher, okay? He's around this population all the time. So it's like, it's very dishonest of Contrapoints to be saying these things about Bailey. Very dishonest. Very, it's just not true. And in fact, Bailey, in Dreger's article, Bailey sent drafts of his book to all of these men in dresses that he researched to get their input. So it's not like he's telling false stories. Jesus Christ.
Bailey describes how Cher made videos of herself wearing female masks and vaginal prostheses.
Yes, in fact, this woman, sorry, I called him a woman. This dude got up in front of one of Bailey's lectures with his vaginal prosthesis and made videos of himself masturbating and doing all kinds of autogynephilic behavior. So, duh.
While receiving anal sex from a sex robot of her own construction, all to the accompaniment of a Donna Summer's album and the moaning audio from a porno film. It honestly sounds like something I would do in a video as a joke. So well done.
Oh, okay, so Contrapoints is going to characterize one of Bailey's research subjects as a joke. Yeah, no wonder you put the transphobia warning at the beginning of the video. I mean, you're arguing against straw. You're creating straw here, Contrapoints.
Bailey, you found an honest-to-God pervert. And look, as a
Okay, there goes Nick again. Nick is characterizing this autogynephilic man as a pervert. Bailey never did that.
Performance artist, I love this sex robot. I admire it, I want it in my life. But as a transsexual, I mean, Bailey, this has nothing to do with being trans.
Okay, what you have to understand is the popularization of transgenderism these days gives these dudes like Nick an easy path, an easier path, I should say. The way that it was much harder for these dudes like Nick to get surgery and to get all this stuff to realize their dream of being a woman back in the day. And so now that it's much easier, Nick is going to bring in this new element as if Bailey and Blanchard are all wrong. I mean, hold on.
Videos of herself wearing female masks and vaginal prostheses
I went back away because I wanted to hear Nick's last statement.
while receiving anal sex from a sex robot of her own construction, all to the accompaniment of a Donna Summer's album and the moaning audio from a porno film. It honestly sounds like something I would do in a video as a joke. So well done, Bailey. You found an honest-to-God pervert. And look, as a performance artist, I love
Autogynephilia is not about this perversion that Nick is making up. Autogynephilia has a very specific definition, and it involves, like I said, the erotic target location error. That's the biggest thing. Of course, I'll put research articles in the description so you will understand what an erotic target location error is. I hope that I've described it. But basically what it is these men like Nick, because Nick admits he's a behavioral autogynephile, men like Nick, they fall in love with an invented female persona that they themselves have created. The erotic target error location is that they're in love with the image of themselves as a woman, not with the women around them or any other person around them. It's turned inward and not outward.
this sex robot. I admire it, I want it in my life. But as a transsexual, I mean, Bailey, this has nothing to do with being trans. You just found a person who built a sex robot.
Yeah, it has everything to do with male transsexualism. Everything in the world to do with it. You just don't like it. You are making up this value judgment and this characterization that neither of these researchers ever made up. Ever.
That's not how Bailey sees it, though. He upholds Cher as an exemplary case of an autogynephilic transsexual.
And yes, and he would be right.
Claiming that Cher's sexual fetishism is typical of the motivations of all trans women who aren't exclusively attracted to men.
Yes, because there are two types. There is the autogynephilic and the homosexual transsexual. Yes.
What Bailey is telling is that autogynephiles are these unfeminine male masturbators showing up to gender clinics with bogus stories of how they always knew they were women in order to...
Yeah, okay. Again, this is a straw man. This is a characterization. Again, Nick is trying to say that Bailey's book was intended to be a peer-reviewed article when it clearly was not. He's trying to make Bailey out to be a quack when he is a fucking researcher. He is a peer-reviewed scientist.
Get genital reassignment surgery to satisfy their paraphilia. Now, what's striking about this to me is even for a defense of Blanchard's theory, Bailey's account is more lurid and grotesque than it needs to be. Bailey...
You're the one making it lurid and grotesque. Bailey wrote a book, okay? He's a scientist who decided to write a more popularized version of his research so that people could understand it. It's more like writing about case studies rather than in all the scientific work that he's done in the past. He didn't do anything majorly wrong here. You're just taking one work and going, see, look, he's a quack.
He likes to think of himself as a dangerous libertine philosopher, pursuing the light of truth wherever it may lead.
Oh, wow. Well, let's talk about Moser then, speaking of a dangerous libertine.
Unrestrained by conventional morality and political correctness alike.
And the reason I brought up Moser is because there's this dude, Charles Moser, who would characterize himself as a sexual libertine, who wants to rewrite the DSM to take out the paraphilia section, who belongs to this board, who wants to legitimize sadomasochism and BDSM, and yet Nick is going to use Charles Moser as a fucking authority to argue against Blanchard. I mean, it just doesn't get any more hilarious.
So filthy. But what does the unrestrained pursuit of truth look like? What objective methodologies does Bailey employ? Well, for the most part, it seems like he just goes to gay bars in Chicago and chats up trans women, turning these stories into case studies for his book. So?
That was the... Okay. He knew all of the autogynephiles that he wrote about in his book. He is a peer-reviewed researcher that has been studying these men for fucking decades. And you are basically taking his one popularized work and saying that he's a quack when he's not. That's your error, Nick, not his.
It's like an awful lot of fun for scientific research. You need a research assistant, Bailey? The Man Who Would Be Queen is filled with sentences like,
There is no way to say this as sensitively as I would prefer, so I'll just go ahead.
all right, you edgy fuck. Let's hear it.
Most homosexual transsexuals are much better looking than most autogynephilic transsexual.
We appreciate the feedback, Bailey. We really do. But is this science?
No, and he didn't intend it to be science. He's got all his other research on autogynephilic transsexuals that go along that are part of his career. So no, Nick. He didn't intend it to be a peer-reviewed article. He admits that. Duh. But it's not like his book is trash. He knew all of these dudes in his clinical practice, in his research. Duh. And he gave them copies of what he was going to put in the book before he wrote the book.
It's effectively a straight cis man announcing his discovery that young straight chicks are hotter than middle-aged lesbians.
Oh, God. Nick, this is so boring.
And trying to pass it off as a valid empirical observation.
He didn't try to pull it off as a valid empirical observation. That's not what his book was about. Read his other peer-reviewed studies. Duh.
And like the pop science cishet men have written over the past century regarding the nature of...
Oh, so now Nick's argument is Blanchard and Bailey are heterosexual males, therefore all of their decades of clinical research is out the window. And we're going to listen to you instead of these educated researchers. We're going to listen to you instead of them because they're heterosexual men.
Females and homosexuals, their observations about trans women are...
So let me ask you, Nick, if we have any kind of theories, any kind of, physics principles, or any other type of law, of natural law, are we going to say that the law doesn't work because it was written by or found by a man or a woman? I mean, but Nick's basically saying that Blanchard and Bailey cannot adequately understand transsexualism unless they're a transsexual. So all their decades of research working with autogynephilic transsexuals and homosexual transsexuals is bunk because they don't have a psychological delusion that they're women. Yeah, that's not an argument, Nick.
Seriously lacking some vital perspective. This is what we postmodernists mean.
Oh, he's a postmodernist. Oh, this is going to be lovely. We're going to make up new words, folks. Like he did in the beginning of the video, where he had to make up new words for Blanchard's typology because for somehow the words were too, I don't know, maybe honest for him. He had to make up new words. We're going to be a postmodernist now. We're going to make up new words. This is what transgenderism is all about. Postmodernist crap.
when we complain that science often privileges a white, cishet male perspective.
Oh, yes, of course, because their science can't be right because they're heterosexual men. Ooh.
It's not that I hate men or male sexuality.
Oh, yes, of course.
I just hate that the male sexual perspective is so powerful that it gets to call itself science.
Oh, and what's your perspective? You're coming from a male sexual perspective too, Nick. Jesus, this video is hilarious.
It's not that there is no objective truth, it's that this represents a very narrow window on it.
Yes, and it was never meant to be a scientific paper. Duh.
Wouldn't anyone care to hear a different perspective?
Oh, yes, let's hear your postmodern new words. Let's erase all of Blanchard's typology and make up new words so that it doesn't offend our feelings.
Well, how about mine?
Let's hear your perspective. I mean, do you realize that all of the autogynephilic transsexuals that Bailey and Blanchard have researched over all of these decades have tried to debunk his theory? And yeah, the scientific community just laughs at them. Not only do they laugh at them for trying to debunk with their perspective on the theory, but they go after the families of these researchers and try to get them ejected out of their long-standing scientific careers. I mean, it's just like, I seriously want you to read Dreger's account of what these autogynephilic transsexuals did to Bailey and Blanchard. I mean, especially Bailey. They weren't content to just sit and talk about the subject. They weren't content, even though they knew, many of these autogynephiles knew that Bailey was working on this book, that Bailey was a respected scientist, and they even had some preliminary copies of what he was going to put in the book. When the book came out, they didn't read it. They looked at the picture on the cover of the book, and they went and attacked his fucking family and tried to get him fired out of his job. Yeah. Glory days ahead. Let's listen to Nick's perspective and postmodernism on how all this is so wrong.
4. My perspective. From my perspective, Michael Bailey is a lecherous edgelord. He's a man who, when I was a student in Northwestern, was mostly famous for the fuck saw incident. Google it.
Yeah, well, I don't care. That's straw. You're basically saying, look at a couple of things this person's done over here, and let's just discount their scientific career.
Of course, that doesn't mean that the fundamental claims of his book aren't true, even if we can prove that Bailey gets...
That's right. That's right. And it doesn't disprove Blanchard, who, at the beginning of this video, you said you were going to disprove, which you still haven't done that.
Together every weekend with Blanchard to sacrifice a trans baby to Beelzebub, it would still
More straw.
have no bearing on the scientific correctness of the theory.
Yes, which you still haven't debunked.
Which might still be true. The problem is, it isn't true.
The theory might still be true, and then Nick says it isn't true, and he still hasn't given a valid argument as to why it's not true.
Which I'll argue at length in a moment. But first, it's worth noting that the theory has gained acceptance among a non-trivial number of academics and journalists.
That's right, it has. It has. So am I to look at you and think that your little personal anecdote is somehow going to challenge the theory? Or am I going to look at other scientists who've been in the field for decades who go, yeah, you know what? Blanchard's a respected theorist and he's a respected scientist. And you know what? He's right. I mean, you know. So I'm going to end this here. And we'll, like I said, his video is so fucking long. And I have shit to do today. I can't sit around and do videos all day. So I will be back with the next part of this video. Thanks for watching. All the links won't be up right away. Trust me, they will. I will put them in the description box, but I'm running late and I have shit to do and I do want to get this video uploaded. So the links I will add in a few hours.